The last laugh. I remember the old days. We were a numerous race, a strong race, a proud race. The children of the gods. We were perfect. Our race was without any flaw. If you actually believe that, you're a fool. One of the gods, which means that, well, you're dead and are unable to protest. It also means that if you're still alive, I will have to kill you. We were religious. We were devout. For 200 years, we ruled this world. More wealthy and wise than any of the races that inhabit our world today. We believed that it was our devotion that kept us alive. It was our devotion that proved to be our downfall, however. It took us many years to realize. We had noticed it much earlier, but we refused to acknowledge it as an actual problem, insisting that prayers and rather underhanded methods would help us. We were dying out. Our children. The number of children that survived childbirth was going down, and a strange illness caught hold of the children that were still alive. It was only slow at first. Many believed that the questionable methods of our northernmost provinces were able to counter it. I do not recall the details, but it had something to do with attempting to use a lesser species to reproduce. It was rather frowned upon at first, but as it got worse, the practice received more and more support. Still, as more years passed, it became obvious that it was not helping. Children kept dying, and adults were now also affected. I remember people begging me to ask my god to either prevent their deaths or to at least make it painless. Some even asked me to kill their children to spare them the pain of the plague. Back then, parents asking me to kill their babies was one of the most shocking things I ever heard. Despite my position, it was something unusual for me. Today, I would simply follow such an order if given, without any second thoughts. I prayed to my god for many days and many nights. I asked, no, begged him to save the innocent children or at least make the deaths painless. Weeks passed without my god giving me any sign that he even listened. The illness only grew worse. It affected adults now as well. Our numbers dwindled. The most advanced race of the entire world, brought to its knees by some illness. No medicine, no magic seemed to save us, so we kept praying. The god of death did not answer my calls, so I called upon the high priest of the other gods to support me in my prayers. More weeks passed and we heard nothing. We did not know. The gods were arguing amongst themselves and started to insult and threaten each other. They did not hear us. A year passed until we saw the sign, and it was not the sign we were waiting for. We heard a loud explosion outside. When we heard to leave the temple, we saw it. War had come. The gods had begun a war against each other. They killed each other. The children were dying like flies, and they fought each other rather than searching for solutions. And what was worse, this motivated the high priests and priestesses to join in. One by one, they left to join the madness that was the slaughter. In the end, only I and 3 others remained. We refused to have any part of this. We were the oldest of the high priests of the different gods. We returned into the temple and closed the doors. We remained inside for many years, until the gods themselves appeared before us, demanding that we join their fight. We looked at each other before we all together declared ourselves no longer being the playthings of the gods who threw us away in a useless war when we needed them the most. We defied the gods, the creators of our world, the beings we had served for our entire lives. Our reward was a slow, agonizing death, and the war continued. Our race died out. The conflict of the gods threatened to destroy the very world. I awoke. Life returned to my body, or what remained of it. I opened my eyes and stood up. I was still in the now ruined temple. The other 3 were also there and stood up. They too had returned to life, but we are nothing but bones. We were confused and studied our own skeletal bodies. Then we heard his voice. The voice of the one who had brought us back to life. He said, "Come, let us save this world." Eridan, the avatar of death, called, and we answered. Our dead gods had died, and from their essence he had been created. We were the first he raised, but not the last. He unleashed the living dead and the powers of the gods whose essence had created him against the remaining gods, as his brethren unleashed their own power against the gods. One by one, the 4 destroyed the remaining gods. When they won the war, they seemed to be uncertain what to do with their immense power. They decided to share the continent of Arkain among themselves, and an age of peace had begun. The avatar of death no longer leaded us, yet he kept us close. He asked us many questions about the world and the Arcanians, about the gods and our civilization. We told him everything we knew, shared every bit of knowledge with him. We were his servants, the first to join his service in fact, so we were eager to oblige. I do not know why he wanted this knowledge, but I think it was then when he made his first plans to shape his world. He created the true elves to populate his part of the world, like his siblings had created their own creations, with the exception of Tregach, the Dark One, who created no race of his own. Countless years passed, several centuries even. We were still in the service of Eredon, but there was no war to fight. As High Priest of the God of Death, I had been a master assassin, and despite lacking targets, I continued my training by hunting animals. The other three in the meantime trained to become master tacticians and fighters. One day, the master called upon us once again. Tregach had betrayed the four. He did not seem surprised in the slightest. We were sure he had already foreseen it, and so we followed him into battle once again. Together with his siblings, he defeated the Dark One, but victory came at a terrible price. We knew of our master's intentions as we marched alongside the servants of his brethren, so we were prepared when Eredon, the Avatar of Death, stabbed Zindrach, the demon god, in the back. The explosion that his sudden death caused, however, was something we could not have prepared ourselves for. It was massive. Due to my weapon of choice, my bow, I was far away and managed to get into cover. The other three and the armies who had come to this place were not so lucky. I too was heavily wounded. When the explosion was over and I could dare to leave my cover, there were no survivors. Only I remained. And in the distance, I could see my master, also heavily wounded. I ran towards him as the continent we stood on was beginning to sink. The realm of the Dark One was completely destroyed and destabilized. It would drown completely. Eredon teleported him, myself, and remains of the three other high priests back to the Dead Mountain. I was able to heal my wounds, but his would not heal, no matter what. But he insisted that it was all part of the plan. He called upon his race and asked them to venture deep into the Dead Mountain. There he would seal them until the time was right for them to return to the surface. They were loyal servants, so they obeyed. Only the ones who lived in a large forest had not answered his call. They probably believed that he had fallen. This was a trick of one of his enemies. Eredon allowed them to remain as their number was low, and those true elves were different from the rest. They were less faithful and independent, but also isolationist. This was the main reason why the Avatar of Death allowed them to stay. The Avatar of Death died, and he rose again. Time passed. New races replaced the old. A few undead Arcanians who had not been destroyed by the explosion slowly decayed. The remains of the Bone Lords, as my fellow high priests had called themselves in service to the Avatar of Death, were sealed in the vaults of the Dead Mountain. Eredon did not have the strength to bring them back to their full strength just yet. Eredon took the title as Watcher of Arkain instead of his old name, and chose to watch the race of Arkain develop. He made sure that they did not kill themselves, but apart from that, he stayed out of their lives. He sent me whenever he needed someone to be assassinated or when a monster needed to be slain. I was the only Arcanian remaining in his service, the oldest being of Arkain, older even than Eredon. The title of the Immortal seemed only fitting, so I accepted it. The more years passed, the more Eredon sent me out while he stayed on the Dead Mountain, watching the world through his unliving servants. Then, the Void Wars came. Now, the Second War is over. It has been over for quite some time now, actually. Eredon has disappeared in the depths of the Dead Mountain. For the first time in my long unlife, I'm without his directive. No orders, no assassinations, nothing but silence. I do hardly remember the last time I have felt like this. I feel empty. The Bone Lords are gone once again. I'm the last of my kind. My proud race? Hardly a memory. For most, little more than a myth. The last of my kind are gone. My master is gone. Only I remain. I've tried to keep myself entertained with hunting to think about other things, but no slain prey seems to satisfy me. If I did not know that his very essence was gone, I would be sure that the God of Death would be satisfied that I, the High Priest who defied his will, am unsatisfied with my current situation. Well, the joke's on him. He's long dead and gone. There is no afterlife for him. I, on the other hand, still have much to do, and in fact, I can do whatever I want. I think I know where I'm going next, and what I will do next. I have defied the gods who created this world. I have lived longer on this world than any other being, both alive and undead, and by the rotten remains of the fallen gods. Even without the commands of Eredon, I still had my place on this world. I just needed to find it. The last laugh would be mine.